Germany is one of the high-risk countries on government's revised list of countries barred from travelling to South Africa. Now, along with other EU states, Germany is being hit by a second wave of COVID-19 infections. The country is South Africa's third largest overseas tourist source market, though, with just over 320,000 visitors. That was last year. The so-called red list, which is updated every fortnight, is based on COVID-19 infections in those respective countries, and it's been heavily criticized by the tourism industry. But tourists from Germany planning to stay for 3 months or longer can travel to South Africa, subject to certain COVID-19 protocols. Let's get you up to speed now. German Ambassador Martin Schafer joins us via our Skype line. He's in Pretoria. Beautiful scene behind you there, Martin, with the jacarandas in full bloom. Thanks so much for your time on the AM report this morning. So the inclusion of Germany on this red list, did it come as a bit of a shock to you?
Well, first of all, the scene behind me is my garden, and it shows all the beauty of South Africa, doesn't it? And it shows how attractive South Africa is for German and many other tourists in the world who would enjoy your wildlife, the people, and the incredible, beautiful landscape. Now, it did come a little bit as a surprise, simply because after the speech of the president in front of the NCOP and the National Assembly, I believe that the strategy of the South African government would be to open up more to help the recovery of South African tourism. Now it is as it is, and I can understand that the South African government has to make very difficult decisions and trade-offs between lives and livelihoods. I think what is important now for the tourism industry is to get some clear indication on the midterm strategy, because, putting countries on the high-risk list one day and, say, 2 weeks later taking them off won't work, simply because tourists have to decide now where they want to spend their African summer.
It is such a difficult decision in so many ways. 320,000 tourist visitors to South Africa from Germany. That was just last year. Of course, we're trying to balance it, being in the midst of a pandemic, and so much discussion now around what looks like the beginnings of a second wave already in South Africa. Martin, what is the latest on your COVID-19 numbers in Germany?
Well, the numbers of this morning are really worrying. We have a steep increase in the numbers in Germany. We're at 11,000 now. That is more than the peak of the first wave, and it seems we haven't been able to stop it now, because the reproduction rate is still above 1. And I think, South Africa has been lagging behind the curve of the European nations. Germany has been lagging behind what our neighbors are experiencing. So I think, indeed, South African authorities need to brace themselves for something that might come in the near future, too. And I think it's very important to take the right decisions now. And I'm not saying that it's right to close borders to international tourists. I think one would have to decide between, complete safety by locking oneself up again. I think that's not the strategy that the European countries and that Germany will take. Or the second option would be to really make sure that those people that are allowed in the country don't import the infections. And I think what has been put in place, meaning forcing each and every visitor coming in to bring in a negative test, and then make sure that those who don't have a negative test will have to be put in quarantine. I think that's the right strategy. And then it's important to have your hygiene protocols in place. And from what I have seen in the Cape and here on the Highveld in the tourism industry, I see a lot of conscience amongst all the players involved that hygiene protocols and reducing social contacts are the way to go. So I think it's up to the South African government now to see what is the way forward. I have just yesterday tried to do a little bit of a calculation of what German tourists mean in terms of the economy of the Western Cape. And my calculation comes to around 200,000 people that contribute something like between 0.6 and 0.8% of the GDP of the Western Cape. That is quite a number. And if you add up all the other tourists from the UK, from the US, from the rest of Europe and elsewhere, you come to very considerable numbers that you would, if you don't open up for the summer season, that you would lose out on. And that would mean livelihoods probably for thousands and thousands of workers and companies.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt the impact of the tourism industry on the whole for South Africa's economy, Martin. But You know, aside from leisure travelers who come for shorter periods of time to spend some time here in South Africa, there are those who are traveling here for business and those who are also traveling here for longer term stays, perhaps their own property in the Western Cape, in other parts of South Africa as well. What do those numbers look like? How many of the people fall into those categories?
I think it was a very smart idea by the South African government to allow those people in. It's mostly elderly, wealthy, well-off people. We call them swallows because they tend to follow the sun just as the swallows do. They would want to spend at home in Germany or elsewhere in Europe the European summer, and then when it gets cold in Berlin or elsewhere in Germany, they would board a plane and come to South Africa to use an apartment they own or a house they have built and to come to South Africa. And that's probably between 30 to 50,000 Germans every year. And those people don't have, the limited time available that usual travelers would have, because they can afford the 10 days of quarantine if necessary. They can pay the price of, when coming back to Germany, have another 5 or 6 days of quarantine because they would want to spend the entire summer holiday here in South Africa, in Cape Town, in Somerset West, elsewhere on the Garden Route. And those people are well off. They bring money into the country. They create employment. And I think it's a good idea to let them in.
So, Martin, we know that this list by the South African government is updated regularly. Germany being one of the largest overseas tourist markets, as we've been discussing, in fact, falling in that, I think it's the top 8 countries bringing in the tourist numbers to South Africa. What kinds of discussions are now taking place between Germany and South Africa?
Well, I'm in constant touch with the Minister of Tourism because I try to support her efforts to get the industry going again. And I understand that, German tourists are welcome here and they play a crucial role in getting the tourism industry going again in South Africa. What I would suggest to the South African government, because there's a lot of speculation around this list, is to make public the reasoning and the algorithm, if you want, behind the list. Because there has been a lot of changes between the first list that comprised around about 60 countries. Now we are at 22, and there's a number of issues that people don't properly understand about the setup of this list. I would think it would be a good idea in a rule of law country, in a democracy where the decisions are not enough, where I think decisions need to be explained, that the South African government comes out with its explanation of how it derives, how it crunches the numbers to come up with the list. I'm not criticizing the outcome because, as I say, it's a very, very difficult trade-off that we will have to make, and this is about lives. And my suggestion would be that all the role players, both in government, on the national level, on the provincial level, and the tourism industry players, including if South Africa wants myself and my colleagues from other source markets, ambassadors, come together to design a strategy that would make sure that lives are preserved in South Africa, that infections are not imported into South Africa, as happened in March, as it seems, and that still, the tourism industry and the small people, the people that live on working and helping tourists in the country, get a chance to get up on their feet again.
Martin, thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report. We appreciate it. Martin Schafer is the German ambassador to South Africa as we continue to track the story around how government is responding to COVID-19 and the very real possibility of a second wave.